A bright afternoon echoed with the sound of joyful laughter. A little girl darted across the yard, her legs moving quickly, her giggles breaking through the air like bells. Behind her, a friendly neighbor clapped and cheered, calling out words of encouragement that only made her run faster. She looked back, her face lit up with trust and excitement, as he waved her on, telling her to keep going, keep hiding, and not to stop. Her small hands brushed against the tall grass as she crouched behind a tree, her heart racing from the thrill of the game. She heard his voice calling out playfully, not far away. Her giggles grew louder, betraying her hiding spot, but she didn't care. He found her easily, laughing as he praised her for being quick and clever. She beamed, her trust in him growing. With every playful exchange, he leaned closer, his voice lowering as he whispered about a special game. He called it the secret path, his tone filled with mystery and excitement. He explained the rules carefully, saying it was a game meant for only the best players, and most importantly, it had to be kept secret. He smiled, describing how they would explore hidden places and find paths no one else knew about. The girl's eyes grew wide, her curiosity lighting up as she nodded eagerly, her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her shirt as she listened, hanging on to every word. The promise of adventure was irresistible, and she agreed without hesitation. He clapped his hands together, praising her for being brave and smart, and promised that she would be the best player he'd ever had. The girl's steps quickened as she followed his lead, her mind racing with thoughts of secret paths and hidden treasures. She smiled, glancing back at her parents in the distance, their laughter soft and unaware. The game began with simple instructions: walk here, stop there, follow this path. She obeyed without question, eager to win his praise. Her small feet followed his every step, her mind too young to see the subtle shifts in his tone or the strange weight behind his smile. Her excitement kept her moving, though a faint unease began to creep in. His instructions grew more precise, his voice firmer. She paused for a moment, glancing around the yard, her instincts whispering something she couldn't quite understand. But his laughter broke the tension, urging her forward, and she obeyed, her trust unshaken. Nearby, the parents watched, their smiles wide as they called out to their daughter, joking about how much energy she had. They laughed at her enthusiasm, never noticing the quick glances she gave toward them, or the slight hesitation in her step. To them, she was just playing a game, and the neighbor was just being kind, as he always was. They turned back to their conversation, their voices light with joy, missing the quiet shadow beginning to settle over their daughter's innocent world. A friendly wave greeted them each morning, accompanied by a warm smile that seemed to light up the street. He was the neighbor everyone spoke of with admiration. Stories traveled from one doorstep to the next about his helpful nature. He was always ready to mend a fence, carry heavy groceries, or offer advice to anyone who asked. His name carried the weight of respect, and his presence brought comfort. To those around him, the family affectionately referred to him as Uncle, a title that reflected their trust in him. His laughter echoed alongside theirs, and his kind words made him feel like more than just a neighbor. He became a part of their lives, a guiding presence they never thought to question. The parents often praised him, saying how lucky they were to have someone who cared for their child with such devotion. The little girl, filled with endless energy, skipped through the yard as her laughter rang out. Her imagination knew no limits, painting colorful worlds that only she could see. She clutched her crayons tightly, filling page after page with her dreams. Each stroke of color brought her stories to life, adventures with heroes, magical creatures, and secret places no one else knew. She ran barefoot, chasing invisible friends, her voice narrating each twist and turn of her make-believe journeys. In the neighbor, she found a companion who listened with delight. He encouraged her tales, adding his own twists to her stories, matching her playful spirit with ease. He clapped at her drawings, praised her creativity, and told her she had a gift unlike any other. She beamed under his attention, her small hands weaving stories even faster as he watched. In her mind, he was someone who truly understood her, unlike the grown-ups who were always too busy to play. The parents laughed as they worked, their heads bent over tasks that seemed endless. They shared quick glances and soft remarks about how much easier life had become with someone to keep their child entertained. They were grateful for the neighbor's presence, seeing him as a blessing in their hectic lives. His kindness eased their worries, his attentiveness giving them the space to focus on their own responsibilities. As their trust grew, so did their dependence on him. They noticed how their daughter's eyes lit up whenever he arrived, how her laughter grew louder, her steps quicker. It was a relief to know she was happy and safe, even if it meant they missed the small details that might have made them pause. The neighbor's presence blended so seamlessly into their lives that they stopped noticing the subtle shifts. His voice became a constant, his praise a balm, and his watchful gaze a comfort they never thought to question. The girl's laughter filled the house, her stories blending with the neighbor's encouragement. The parents moved through their routines, their minds at ease as they trusted the man they had welcomed so readily into their lives. But trust has a way of casting shadows when left unchecked, and in their relief, they never stopped to look for the edges where the light began to fade. This is our secret, he said with a playful grin. His tone was light, but the weight of his words lingered in the air. He spoke of a new rule, one that made the game feel special, like it was meant only for them. The girl nodded quickly, her wide eyes filled with trust and excitement. She loved secrets, they made her feel important. The promise hung between them, binding her to the game in a way she didn't fully understand. The game grew more thrilling with each passing day. The friend added new twists, each one drawing her in deeper. She laughed and followed, eager to prove she was clever enough to win. Yet, beneath her excitement, a small feeling began to grow. It was quiet at first, like a whisper in the back of her mind. She ignored it, brushing it aside with every new challenge he presented. At home, her mother's voice broke through her thoughts. A simple question, casual and kind, "What did you do today?" The girl paused, her answer slow and uncertain. She mumbled something about playing, her words vague and incomplete. Her gaze drifted as she spoke, unable to meet her mother's eyes. Her small hands fidgeted, her mind caught between what she wanted to say and what she had promised to keep. Hidden, her mother watched her closely, her smile fading as unease flickered in her heart. But the feeling passed quickly. She shook her head, laughing softly to herself. Children were always full of secrets, weren't they? Harmless little games and fantasies that made their world brighter. She dismissed the moment, turning back to her tasks. The girl's behavior shifted in small, quiet ways. She spent more time alone, her gaze distant and thoughtful. Her crayon sat untouched, her once lively stories replaced with long silences. When she did speak, her words felt lighter, as though she was keeping something important locked away. Her mother noticed the changes but waved them off as playful mischief. After all, children always went through phases. One day, the friend called to her, his voice gentle but insistent. He spoke of a new part of the game, something he said she had to see. His steps were steady and deliberate, leading her further than they had ever gone before. She hesitated, her feet rooted to the ground. As her eyes darted toward the edge of the village, the trees loomed ahead, their shadows stretching like long fingers across the earth. His voice pulled her forward, smooth and encouraging, as he promised it was all still part of the game. She took a step, then another, her heart quickening with each one. The woods grew closer, their darkness swallowing the light. A question formed in her mind, circling over and over again, is this still part of the game? That evening, her voice wavered as she spoke to her mother. She mentioned the woods, her words quiet and uncertain. There was a pause, a small flicker of something in her mother's eyes, but it faded as quickly as it came. Her mother smiled gently, waving her off with soft reassurances. Work weighed heavily on her mind, leaving no room for the unease she couldn't quite place. Her father chuckled as he patted her head. His voice was warm and kind as he spoke of fun and innocence. "It's just a game, sweetheart," he said, with a grin, brushing away her concerns without a second thought. His words were meant to comfort, but they silenced the small voice within her. The girl nodded and smiled, but the unease lingered, growing heavier with each passing day. "This is the last round," he said, his voice carrying a sharpness that hadn't been there before. His eyes gleamed with urgency as he explained the new rules, each word heavy with a strange insistence. The girl blinked, her hands fidgeting, as a quiet alarm rang in her chest. She searched his face for reassurance, but something about his tone made her heart beat faster. She nodded slowly, her excitement replaced by a creeping unease she couldn't quite name. Her small steps were hesitant now, her usual eagerness dimmed by the weight of his words. The rules seemed different this time, less like a game and more like a test. She followed, but the voice inside her whispered louder, urging her to turn back. Still, she kept moving, trusting him despite the knot tightening in her stomach. The home, her mother's fingers brushed against something crumpled in the pocket of a discarded dress. She pulled out a piece of paper, the edges torn and smudged with faint scribbles. Her brows knitted as she studied it, tilting her head to make sense of the jagged lines and strange symbols. They formed a map, leading to places on the edge of the village, places far from where children usually played. Her chest tightened as realization dawned. The dots connected in her mind, forming an unsettling picture. The friendly neighbor, the secretive games, the growing distance in her daughter's eyes, it all clicked together like a puzzle she wished she hadn't solved. The worry that had been simmering inside her boiled into urgency. She gripped the paper tightly, her jaw set as she prepared to find answers. Her footsteps were swift, her breath uneven as she followed the path marked on the paper. Her heart pounded louder with every step, a drumbeat of fear and determination. Her eyes caught a glimpse of movement ahead, her daughter's small figure trailing behind the neighbor. His voice drifted back, low and commanding, his steps deliberate as he led her toward a shadowed path. The mother's voice broke through the air, sharp and unyielding. It cut through the quiet like a blade, freezing them both in place. Her daughter turned, her face pale with surprise and confusion. The neighbor's charm crumbled, his confident demeanor faltering as he stammered for words. Her fierce glare held him like a flame, her accusations burning away any attempt at defense. The girl ran to her mother, her small hands gripping tightly as tears streamed down her cheeks. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "I thought he was my friend." The weight of those words hung between them, heavy with shattered trust and the sharp sting of betrayal. The neighbor stammered, his excuses weak and hollow against the mother's fury. She stood firm, her resolve unshaken as she shielded her daughter from the man she had once trusted. His words fell away, leaving only the truth of his actions exposed in the harsh light of her anger. The girl clung to her mother, her tears slowing as a quiet resolve replaced her sobs. She looked back at the man, her innocence replaced by a hard-earned understanding. The lesson was bitter, but it was one she would never forget. Trust, she realized, was not something to give lightly. As they turned to leave, the bond between mother and daughter grew stronger, built on a promise to protect and to listen. The shadows of the past faded behind them, but the resolve to never let it happen again carried them forward. The family stood together, their voices steady but heavy with pain. Words of betrayal spilled out, each one sharp with anger and sorrow. The once trusted friend looked at them, his head low, the weight of his choices pressing down like a heavy stone. He tried to speak, but their unwavering gaze silenced him. There was nothing he could say to undo what had been done. The elders sat in a quiet circle, their faces stern, their eyes sharp with judgment. Each word from the family painted a clear picture of the betrayal that had unfolded. The once friendly neighbor shifted uncomfortably, his confidence stripped away. His silence grew louder as the elders exchanged knowing looks. The decision was swift. He was cast out, his shame following him as he left the gathering. His smile, once warm and inviting, had turned into a shadow of regret. The village whispered the truth, their voices ensuring the story would not be forgotten. The name once spoken with trust was now uttered with disdain. The home, the parents sat beside their daughter, their arms wrapped around her protectively. She spoke softly, her voice trembling as she shared her fears. Her words wove together the confusion and sadness she had carried alone. The parents listened intently, their eyes glistening with guilt and determination. They whispered promises, their voices steady as they vowed she would always be heard. Quiet moments filled their days. The parents stayed close, their actions speaking louder than words. They sat with her as she played, her laughter slowly returning to fill the space that fear had once occupied. Each smile she gave felt like a step toward healing, her trust mending little by little. In the evenings, the parents sat together, reflecting on the choices they had made. Regret sat heavily between them as they recounted the signs they had ignored. Their trust had been misplaced, leaving their family vulnerable. They vowed to be vigilant, to never let their assumptions blind them again. At village gatherings, their story became a warning. Words of caution echoed through the crowd, urging others to watch carefully, to listen closely, and to protect fiercely. Their pain became a lesson, a shield for others in the community. The family found strength in their unity. Though the wound remained, they carried it together, using it to ensure no other family would suffer the same. Their home became a place of safety and trust once more, their bond unbroken and their hearts resolved. The betrayal, though painful, had become a source of wisdom, safeguarding not only their own family but the entire village. The trust of a child is a thread as fine as morning dew, shimmering with purity and faith. It ties their small, open hearts to the hands of those who guide them, binding innocence to safety. Yet, this thread is fragile, easily broken by neglect or betrayal. When it snaps, the world shifts, leaving wounds that no amount of time can fully erase. A child's belief in the goodness of others is a light that must be guarded fiercely, for once dimmed, it is difficult to restore. There are always whispers, faint and quiet, of what could be. A hesitant glance, a trembling word, a refusal to speak. These are the signs, the subtle warnings carried by children too young to fully understand what they see. Too often, they are brushed aside, waved off as the stirrings of a wandering mind. Yet, in these moments, the truth lies hidden, waiting for someone to notice. Ignorance is the first stone on the path to regret, each step heavier than the last. The story holds a mirror to those who listen, revealing how easy it is to miss what truly matters. A laugh that hides unease, a silence that speaks of fear. These are the signals calling out to be heard, ignored only by those too distracted or too blind to see. The narrator's voice grows firm, calling for parents to watch and listen. Presence is the shield every child needs, vigilance the armor that protects them from harm. Not every smile hides kindness. The words land heavy, carrying the weight of truth. Not every friend is safe. Faces once trusted may conceal intentions that bring only harm. The story's conclusion is sharp, its lesson clear: safeguarding children is not a task to take lightly. Vigilance must replace assumption, for the world is filled with dangers hidden in plain sight. The narrator's tone softens, yet the urgency remains. Protect the young, the words plead. Listen to their words, their silences, their glances. Be their shield against a world that does not always mean well. Trust, once broken, is difficult to mend. The final call to action echoes like a drumbeat, urging those who hear to stand guard over the fragile hearts entrusted to their care. In vigilance lies safety. In protection lies peace.